Today we're going to be talking about data cleaning and what I'm going to call data munging. Basically, we're talking about I've got data and I need to start futzing with it to get it in the shape that I need it to be in so I can do my work. And this part of the process is really important, tends to take a long time. We maybe don't talk about it as much as we should, so let's go over it. The purpose of doing this is that when we enter data, we make errors, right? So sometimes we're using data that somebody typed in by hand, or maybe they wrote and we scanned in, but there's just stuff that's wrong in it. The other thing we're doing here, so this is what I mean by cleaning, and this is largely what I mean by munging. So sometimes, let's say we have a column that has a month and a year in it, and for our analysis we just need a year, so we're going to want to split out that column so we just have a column with year. Or sometimes we get a spreadsheet and it's got 100 columns in it and there's really only 5 that we need for our analysis, so we're just going to go in and clean that up, munge it around so it's what we need. I want to talk a little bit before we get started, though, about file organization, because we have a problem, or we're going to have a problem as we start working with data. In that we're going to get data and then we're going to start messing with it and creating more and more files, and we need a way to organize them, and we need a way to preserve the original data so that we know what we did. So basically I think of this as like that original data file that we get. The original data is like it's like criminal evidence. I want to preserve it so that if we ever want to go back to it and see what happened, we can, and we can go back to it untouched, right? We don't want to mess with the crime scene, but instead what we want to do is we're going to kind of make some changes and then save those as separate files. So this is the way that I like to do it. If I receive a original file that looks like this, and let's say I filter it, right? I only need some of these case reports. I don't need all of these case reports. I'm going to save that as a new file. I'm going to include the date that I made that file, like this, so that I can sort through and see, okay, what's my most recent version of that file, because you'll get into a situation where you have multiple versions of these files and you want to know which is the real one. I'm also going to say what I did to that file, just so that I know, okay, that's what's going on here. If at all possible, I want to somehow keep a record of how I went from here, this first file that I got, to this file that I've messed with, okay? And there's a lot of different ways of doing that. The easiest one in relation to this class is to use Workbench, because Workbench provides me a list of steps that I took, and I can even include notes for myself to remind myself why I did something. So that's good if I ever need to look back and know what I did, or if I need to repeat it. Excel, notably doesn't do this. If you make a change in Excel, it just happened. And let's say you filter out something or you delete some rows, and then you come back a year later, you might completely forget that you removed those rows, and you'd have no way to know. As you get more advanced in your data analysis, start using tools like R or Python. These are also really good tools for documenting what you've done and documenting your workflow. All right, so some really basic processes related to munging or kind of reformatting files. And I'm going to go through these in a bunch of different tools, because I think it's good for you to know how to do it in different tools, because some are good for some things and some are good for others. So a really basic thing we want to do is delete columns. So here's a police blotter. Police blotter has an incident number, disposition, officer location. Let's say that I am sure that I do not need the incident number column. All I'm going to do is control click at the top of that column and delete. So for a little file like this, it might not make sense to delete that column, but if I have 30 columns and I just want to reduce it so I can look at it, this might make more sense. All right, so that's in Excel. Let's go over to Workbench. Same file in Workbench, and basically the same process. So when I'm in Workbench, I hover over the column. I'm going to get this orange arrow, and I can delete this column. So here you can see a really nice thing about Workbench is what I was saying is I get a record of what I did, okay? And I can always undo that. So if I just play this step up here, okay, so if I click on this step, I can go back to that one, and then I can replay this if I want to, or I can even delete this step if I decide I didn't want to do that. In Open Refine, the way that we delete a column is basically the same. So I'll come to the arrow at the top, and I will edit column, and then I will remove this column, okay? So removing columns really easy across all of these different pieces of software. Filtering data, I really like to filter data in Open Refine. So I'm just gonna walk it through here. So Open Refine gives me a view of some of my data, but not all of my data. So I've got 30,000 rows here. I'm just gonna look at 10. And let's say that I wanna filter my data based on this disposition column. So one thing here is there's dispositions that we might not be interested in, right? There's no report and there's report. Did they file a report or not? And I might only want to look at the times they filed a report. So if I click here, I'm going to go to facet, text facet. So facet is a word that you'll see across a lot of software, and it just means like category basically. So it means break it apart into all the different values that are in this column. So when I do that, I see over here, these are my my facets or my categories, all right? And I can sort my count if I want, but let's say I want only let's say I only want the arrest. That's kind of interesting. All right, so now in Open Refine, you see this changed to 1,131 matching rows, and it's only the arrests. If I now go export and export a CSV file or an Excel file, the file that is exported is only this filtered view, okay? So I could now export a file, and I'll go ahead and do it because we can talk about file naming. I can export this file, and I will save it as something like today's date, SMPD incident blotter, and then I'd probably save it as something like only reports or only arrests is what we did. And I'd put it in my work area. So that way I know exactly what this file is and when I created it. In Open Refine, I can filter based on multiple things. So let's say I only want arrests, and I also want to filter on the officer, and I only want arrests by Ashley Allen. Now I have this 16 matching rows, and I can export this. So again, you can do this in the other software. I really like it in Refine, so I'm going to only talk about it in Refine. Let's see, so split columns. Splitting columns is when we have something like, the other nice thing about Refine is that it kind of works like Workbench, and that I can just go back to my full list. I can take away what I did. It also has a history right here that shows you everything you've done. Okay, so this column, time reported, has a year and a month and a day and then a time. And one thing to understand is that in most software, columns have a type, okay? So if I come here to edit cells, common transforms, I can make this a number column, a date column, a text column. Right now it's a date column because it saw that it had a date and a time in it. But I'm gonna go ahead and make it a text column. And I lost some information there, and that's okay for what we're doing because I just want to show you how to split out like the year or the day or the month from this. So when I'm splitting columns, that means I'm going to turn this column into multiple columns. And here we're going to turn it into a month, a day, and a year. And to do that, what we do is we rely on there being consistent formatting, and then we tell it a character to split on in the most basic usage. So if I come here and I edit column, and I'm going to split this column into several columns. And here it's going to say how I'm going to split it by the separator. Okay, and a separator just means what character are we going to split on. So here I'm going to take the comma because I'm going to split January 1st and 2019 into two columns. And I'll go ahead and click OK. So now I have January 1st and 2019. And now if I want to split this into month and day, I can just do the same thing, edit column, split into several. And now my separator is not a comma, but it's a space. All right, so now I definitely want to rename my columns. Edit column, rename. This is now month, this is now day, this is now year, okay? So now I can do all sorts of things like group by the month or group by the year, and I have a lot more flexibility. Workbench, this works exactly the same way. So if on, we add a step called split column, it's gonna ask which column we're splitting. I'm gonna say time reported. Delimiter is another word for separator, okay? You can also do fancy stuff like I want to do X number of characters from the left, which we could actually do. So let's say we are going to take 4 characters from the left and get just the year. Okay, so it's going to tell you this is a date time column. I want it to be text. We do that. And then we run our split column. Okay, so we ran our split column. Now we've got year. And we could then proceed through and do the rest of this. So here I could take 3 columns from the left, or 3 characters from the left, and then I could replace the hyphen. So let's do that because this kind of just involves some creativity at this point. So I'll add a split step. Okay, I'm gonna split characters from the left. I'm going to take 3 characters from the left and run that. All right, so I forgot to tell which column, but we run that. And now I've got this. Now what I want to do is I want to find and replace. Okay, so this works just like search and replace does, except I'm going to be working on time reported 2-1. I'm going to search for a hyphen, and I'm going to replace it with nothing, and I'm going to run that. Now I've got my month, and I could continue doing this until I had my nice year, month, and day columns like that. All right, so getting into some more interesting things. So a lot of times we have typos, right? We just have things that are spelled incorrectly or entered wrong or entered inconsistently. And this is really, it's most important, maybe only important, when we're going to use the values in that column as a category, which means we're going to group by them. So here in our blotter, if I want to group by activity and I only want the fireworks columns, it really matters to me if I have a typo in my activity column, right? If I mistype fireworks, I'm going to miss that. So that really matters. The other time that really matters is if I'm going to match across data sets, right? So a lot of times I have addresses in one data set and I'm going to match them to another data set. That really matters. Okay, so what we want to do is take all of these kind of values that might be bad or mistyped and convert them into these that are good. So the way we're going to do this is the easiest way is to group them and then look for the groups that don't have a lot of members. So let me show you that. Okay, so I'm going to show you this in Refine again because I think Refine's the best tool to use this. You can also find these kinds of errors in Excel by creating a pivot table, but I really like it in Refine, so I'm going to show you this. So here's a data set. It's actually very clean, but this least type column is one that we're definitely going to want to group by, right? I might want to know traditional leases, and I might want to know by the bed. And so I want to know, is this column consistent? So what I can do in Refine is go back to Facet, Text Facet, to create my groupings, and then what I want to look for is sort by count, and then I want to look for the ones that don't have many, because again, typos, you're more likely to type it correct most of the time and incorrect a few times. So here I see that I've got 3 of these traditional, and I can't even tell the difference right now. It might be that it has a space at the end. I think that's what it is. So if in Refine, I can just click edit right here, and I'm going to edit these values. So if I take that space away and apply it, I've now corrected that. And I can do that with all of my columns. So I could do it to management company here. Management company is going to be a little bit harder because we don't expect there to be a lot of the same. All right, so sorting by count here doesn't really do anything because we have a lot that only have one, and that's what we would expect. But instead, if I sort by name, I can kind of skim through really quick and start to see, okay, American campus communities with a space. I probably want to merge all those together. So I can do that really quick here with edit. And I'm also about to show you another quick way to do this. So the other way to do this is by using some kind of advanced features that are in Refine. They're also in Workbench to a lesser degree. So once I've created a facet here, a text facet, and I have my list here, I can go to cluster, and what it's going to do is start looking for things that are very similar. Okay, so I definitely want these to be the same, and I can just say merge it, call it this. American campus communities, I definitely want these to be the same, merge it, be this. So then I can say merge and recluster, which means take those together and then do it again. Look for anything that might be similar. Method and keying function are just different ways of looking for similarity. So a good thing to do is just flick through these and see, are there anything that that might be the same that it just didn't catch using the other function. So this is really good. I would definitely want to merge those. I would definitely want to merge these, and I might want this to be title case like that. So I can merge and recluster until I've gone through all of these and I'm feeling pretty good about my data. So this is really good when you might have typos in your data. All right, so here's another data set that definitely needs cleaning. So this is a really big data set, 145,000 rows, and just to make this smaller, I'm going to go ahead and filter it down to one county. So let's get a county. We'll just do Harris County, and that's just because some of this clustering takes a lot of processing, so I don't want it to take too long. All right, so I have this offense column, and this offense column is a really interesting one. If we look at it, because so there's 3,000 different values in this column. So that means they vary a lot, but this is also something I would want to be able to filter by or group by, right? I might want to know about the capital murder, people who are in prison for capital murder. And if there's typos there, that's not good. So what I can do is come here and I can come to edit cells, cluster, and edit, okay? So if there's not too many choices, you can do cluster right here, but if there's a lot of choices, we come to edit cells, cluster, and edit. Okay, so we have exactly the same thing here, but you can see here why this would be so useful, okay? So these are obviously all the same, theft between 2,500 and 30,000, okay? So I definitely want to merge those, okay? Theft, 25, so this is the same one. It's just not catching it right here. So one thing that I could do is merge all of these into the same value, right? And I'm going to want to go through all of these and merge and recluster, merge and recluster, merge and recluster until I have the values that I want. So this might take a lot of time, but this is also really powerful, and for a data set of this size, it's the only way you're going to be able to do it. All right, so the last thing I'm going to cover really quickly is how do we correct numeric values, right? Because something like a property value, we don't expect it to match anything. It's just a number, and the only thing is we want the number to be right. Okay, so we can't use any of the techniques that we've talked about. So really all we do is we try to look for anything that doesn't make sense. And basically that means that most number attributes of things have a range that makes sense, right? Someone can be 10 years old, they can't be 200 years old, okay? A property value is probably not going to be $200. If it's a residential property, it's also probably not going to be like $700 million, okay? So there's a range, and really all we can do is look for things that aren't in that range. So you can do this a number of ways. You can just sort your data, like in Excel or in Workbench or in any of these programs, and look at your highs and lows That's really easy. I'm going to just quickly show you how to do it in Refine. So if I have a numeric column like value, I can do a facet, and instead of a text facet, I'm going to do a numeric facet. And this just gives me a slider showing me the range of data, and this is just an easy way for me to see. I don't know if you can see it right here, but there's a little blue thing here telling me way at this top end at 100,000 millions, billion, $2 billion, I have one property way out there. So if I just slide this over, I can see, okay, what's way out there? This is an apartment. It's not worth billions of dollars here. So I know that's wrong. And at that point, what I have to do is verify the data. I have no way of knowing, oh, did they add an extra 1? Did they add an extra 5 at the end of it? Where the typo is. So I'm just going to go back to my records and say, hey, this obviously isn't right. Can you please give me the correct value? All right, so that is it for cleaning and munging. It's a process that can be really difficult, can take a lot of time. It also requires a lot of kind of creativity and critical thinking. It can be a fun process. You can do almost everything in Refine. I think Refine is a really, really strong tool for this. But you can also do most of this in Workbench and to a lesser extent, Excel.